Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host of the channel, RPG with DBJ, and thank you very much for showing up to the station for the imagination. I really appreciate you guys being here. Today we are still continuing our talk about about clerics. We're still cutting class, talked about the whole thing, but today is pretty special. Today's is Hump Day, and we get to talk about world building on this World Building Wednesday and using clerics. Now, okay, we have to establish some rules here because we can go down a rabbit hole of real world experiences with this, and I have a feeling we probably will anyway. But I want to establish some rules. So one thing is, I would like us to, yeah, I would like us to not delve too deeply into our own real world histories too much, so that we can world build with clerics without having to potentially offend one or more others, because we want to keep this pretty arcane. I don't know, Cam, are you thinking a god of like pork byproducts, or are you thinking of a god of hard as a mother? Although both would actually fit. Okay, so before we get too deeply into world building with clerics, here's some of the rules with world building on World Building Wednesday. Anyway, it's pretty easy, right? We take whatever subject we're talking about and we shape a setting around this subject having the most influence in the world. But I do want to start out with one thing that I think is, before we went live, I started rambling about. I usually ramble about something other than what we're about to talk about, but I think it actually makes a point. Cam's like, yeah, definitely both. Bacon! Oh man, yep, it's moved up from bacon's not just a side item, it's a seasoning now. I'm pretty sure it's a seasoning. You know, you got to put bacon right up on the table, little crunchy bits you sprinkle on everything. Anyway, there's plenty of bacon worship here in the U.S. You could pretty much find any item bacon flavored and or bacon visuals on it if you want to find it that way. But no, seriously, this is something that was brought up by the Jarl DM before in our discussions, and this is much prior to what we talk about here. Is like, there's something in Dungeons and Dragons that's unspoken that the common folk understand the difference between the normal, and this is weird, is it? Normal arcane power and divine interference. Because there's too many things out there that simply by virtue of them existing, all they have to do is say, oh, I'm an avatar agent, or I'm from a divine purpose, and normal people would be like, oh, you must be, right? In a normal setting, you know, any fey creature, any wizard, any charlatan, shape changers, all these beings could very easily portray themselves as having some kind of divine nature. And not that they couldn't, but you would think that most of society, in one way or another, would be like, "Oh, that Sphinx. Oh, that's a godling. Of course, that Naga is a godling." And yes, that, you know, I don't know, and it sprite or whatever fey creature or something. They've got great powers. They must have gifts from the gods, right? You would think that, but in Dungeons and Dragons, it really doesn't work that way. So there must be. Maybe it's subtle. It's not. It's an unspoken rule that humanity is absolutely paranoid and scared of magic and monsters and things, but they don't automatically consider them all to be of a godly nature. So I wonder about that. Anyway, all right. It's just a side note. When we were off channel, we were talking. I was making the point that 95% of all results of things happening to humanity always happens to humans. It never happens to any of the other races. None of the undead creatures, none of the mummified creatures, no vampires, none of the giants, none of the. Anyway, uh, that's a little something for you guys to think about. All right, so one of the reasons why I wanted to get away from our real world clerical devastations of the planet is is just the fact that yeah, you're Jarl DM. I'm a little mad at you. You cheated on me yesterday, having your own channel and doing your own live stream. I gotta pout a little bit, whatever. No, guys, please check out the Dias cast. I was at work when I was listening to it. Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would love to. Yeah. We'll set that up. We'll do that. I will bring my low classisms to your channel and abuse the hell out of it. Yeah, Jarl DM says, yeah, there's a distinction either in the way spells are cast or something, or in the way the magic looks that people can see. Yeah, that tells them one is divine and one is arcane. I, it's just a thing I've noticed. Like, oh, I don't know, there's evil spirits in over in the crypt, and people were just instantly like, hey, could you help us with our evil spirit problem, instead of going like, the gods must be angry at us because they're bringing back the dead. What did we do to offend them? Like, there's none of that. It's just, I just noticed, it just made me think about it, because I remember you've mentioned before, like, if people knew there was magic, why wouldn't they automatically think that there's like some kind of divine cause to it, because even in our own human cultures, we've had people that have been emperors and kings and nobles that have self-assigned themselves some form of divinity, and people were like, you know what, makes a lot of sense. They've been chosen by the gods or whatever, or a god, right? Monotheistic, right? Yeah, they've been chosen by a god. Of course they're divine and we aren't. And it just made me think about that. Yeah, Andrea says the wizard uses spell components. The clerics brandish their holy symbols to cast spells, at least in D&D. Yeah, it must be, well, not just the holy symbols and whatnot, but the meta of it is that we look down on the character sheet and we look at the spells, but the in-world function must be absolutely arcane, that it's extremely difficult to hide it. Like, hey, if I go cast, what's something similar? I'm trying to think of something, an arcane ability that seems okay. If I use magic missile, I'm literally like using my arcane focus, which absolutely positively is not a religious symbol, rather than a cleric that says, spouts words of attrition or something. Like, it must be absolutely something completely different that the wizard does, that couldn't be mistaken for something that's divine, overall. So one of the things I think I don't mean to be dismissive of it, but more or less we yeah. Yeah, like Tessa says, it's not a holy symbol; it's a scientific tool. Yeah, there's a bit of the, we're harnessing energies in a scientific manner that wizards do that clerics don't do. Okay, so Deadman says raise dead is both a wizard spell and a cleric spell. So is it the difference between Dr. Frankenstein raising the dead versus like a person praying that the dead comes back to life? He's running around with chemicals and zapping the body with electricity and stitching it together. Like, is it that much of a difference? I don't know. So we Dungeons and Dragons tends to default to a very Eurocentrified version of like most of its things, including the clerical abilities, like with a holy symbol and possibly a book that has things written in it that is holified, and a symbol that, of course, it doesn't have to look like like a Christian or a Jewish or a Muslim symbol, but it tends to default to that. And I wonder if there's a way for us to change that in this world. Um, like Jarl DM says, there's quite a bit of crossover in terms of spells, which makes me think there are specific words and somatic components that are the same. Maybe, I don't know. I think you could make that. I think it makes sense to make that a rational thing. Although, a spell of fire, like a wall. Let's say a cleric has the ability, because there are domains that cross over. So if a cleric casts a wall of fire versus a wizard, you know, are the words somatic components different? They are of the same nature. They both have to do them, but they could be completely different. Which, if you want to, in your setting, you could establish, hey, listen, if you cast, if there's anything related to fire, it looks this way, right? Like there's this common component between the two, whether it's somatic or verbal or material, that there is a connection between the two. So I could see that, especially if Dungeons and Dragons now has like a spell and then it lists the character classes that use it, rather than here's all the clerical abilities and here are the details, and there's a wall of fire for a cleric versus a wall of fire for a wizard. So I could see that as well. And who knows? Who knows that the wizards haven't stolen something? Your DM says magic is magic. The only thing that changes is where you pull it from. I don't know. I think you could argue. That the essence of the gods infuses a cleric versus a wizard, maybe, who's like, if they're taking it from the same place, they're stealing it, or a godling could give them, on another plane of existence, could give a cleric fire, where the wizard steals it from the elemental plane of fire. I think you could make a distinction if you wanted to. I don't know. Um, I'm counter arguing. I'm the devil on the other shoulder, dude. Yeah, Andres Martin says one thing that could be cool. It's making people accept the evil gods as a natural part of the world that you have to learn to live with. Maybe their clerics are not even evil. Yeah, I'm the Naismith. Yeah, um, I think tieflings are an example of that. Like, why isn't there a concerted effort to kill off all the tieflings in the world? Um, yes, I know that it's meta wise, it's a character choice, but literally there are people walking around with the blood of fiendish beings and planes and creatures walking around on the earthly plane. Why wouldn't people just destroy them all? Uh, you know, we've had Salem witch trials, from people that just randomly accused of being a witch because they just didn't like the way they looked. Having actual horns and or a tail and or cloven hooves, and going into a local tavern like, hey, bartender, get me a drink. It's pretty strange, but yeah, whatever. um, yeah, Jarl DM says, yeah, I think there could be a visible and notable difference, but I think you could also say that they're the same. Interesting to think about it in the setting. Yep. Yes, and I am the official Naismith. No, Cameron says, is there a god of magic in the Forgotten Realms? Don't wizards get their power from their goddess through the weave, or does she just control magic? Thank you there, Andres. Is Mistra. There is a god of magic. In a lot of settings, they do create that. So, okay, so here is that's Greyhawk. Bacab. Isn't it from Greyhawk? And Mistra from Bacab from Greyhawk, Mistra from Forgotten Realms. I don't know Mystara, and I can't think of the other ones. Savros, yep. Azoth, Agma, yep. And it does make you kind of think, like, is this the same godling with different names or whatnot? So one of the strange things, and I understand this is from a creation point of view, is that if in classic Dungeons and Dragons, we know that there is physical evidence of the gods being there. But what if the gods came first, right? Like the people believe in it, then I could see some of the other character class types becoming needing to hide who and what they are, unless they are given some kind of permission or something from the religious organizations in the world. So what I mean is, like, if we're going to world build with clerics, then thereby wouldn't a wizard be kind of like the nature of a wizard might be like seen as like a thief or an usurper simply by virtue of trying to study magic without basically permission from the divine. And I could even see, yeah, it's Bacab and Greyhawk, yeah, god of magic, arcane knowledge, balance, and foresight, which you kind of bring up a point there, Tesla. And yeah, Mistra, the mother of all magic, was a greater deity and the second incarnation of the goddess of magic after her predecessor. Mistral sacrificed herself to something. Anyway, it could be maybe there is in a world of clerics, maybe there was a god that brought down magic to the people, and much in the similar way that we think of like the Titans, biker Mistra. That's really cool. I love myself some urban magic. That's really cool. That's awesome. I think maybe you could look at what is it, like one of the Titans brought fire to humanity. Magic could be that way, where magic was gifted to the wizards to, like, you know, a group of worshippers, like Prometheus giving the fire. Was it Prometheus? Yep, Prometheus giving fire. Maybe one of the gods of magic instead gave magic to the people, irregardless of needing to have worship of in a divine sense. I would even see that. I could even see associating certain types of monsters and creatures along religious lines. So you could have these like major city states spread all over the world, and like the Minotaur, and could be associated as one of the gods, and then maybe like avians, maybe most of the major avians might be associated with another godling. And so the human population, despite how evil a lot of these monsters would be, maybe certain city states are inundated and surrounded by these creatures that are not. They are they are hazards to everybody else except the one city state where there's like gargoyles flying around delivering messages, or there's like Pegasi that people are riding on in a particular city that no one else has an affinity towards or whatever. Yeah. I'll get to Cupid. I will get into the Discord in a minute. Caius of Glantry, what's up there, Caius? I like the idea of priests of evil gods being there not to serve their god, but specialists in managing their rages and pacifying them. A large part of ancient Greek religion was avoiding provoking. Yeah, that's um I too think that Carl Urban is magic. It's so silly. Uh, anyway, I do like the idea. See, I think it's not a matter of whether someone in these arcane worlds believes in the gods or not. I think it's what is their relationship to them. Like, no one has to like the gods to believe in them. They could think they're assholes. It's just like you're saying, Caius. It's not provoking them to get them angry, or it's the throw a coin into the sea so that we can have a safe passage, because the god of the ocean and storms is going to probably capsize our boat, right? It's like, we don't really like this person. I mean, this godling, we're just doing it because we don't want to upset them. And yeah, I think that's more appropriate. The whole idea of being an atheist in the fantasy realm is pretty ridiculous, but respect, that could go out the window pretty easily when the gods are killing everybody. Ooh, lurker, what's going on there? A blind lurker, what's going on? All right. Tesla puts in Cupid Cupid is the god of love and the son of Aphrodite and an unspecified father. His job is to spread love to mortal beings by causing them to fall in love with one another at first sight. We tend to. I wonder why we don't. It's easy to make domains for gods like, oh, here's the god of war, god of fire, god of healing. But I wonder why we stay away from pantheons and have clerics as part of a pantheon and worshiping one or all of the pantheon and just being the one who is like the diplomat between the gods, like, oh, we're about to take an ocean voyage, well, here we must do these things to placate the god of the ocean. And then when they go into the mountains, they're like, oh, there's an earth the earth deity, and here's something like that. Xena warrior princess had a lot of those characters in there. Oh man. The RDM says Jeff Doty made a setting where only elves could use arcane magic. It took centuries to learn even the basics of arcane magic, so humans couldn't practice it. Yep. Someone, Mike Molesky, contacted me yesterday and talked about like what if, we talk about how the gods settings where the gods have died or whatever. What if there's something in the middle where there's like a battle between the gods, and literally humanity has like caged or imprisoned or is trying to rejuvenate an injured or dead god, or a godling that has been cast into a cage, like a Tartarus kind of thing. But the Tartarus isn't in the underworld, or maybe it is in the underworld, but it's a physical place human beings can go to. Like, I could imagine like a godling being, I hate to use this verbiage, but being milked for its power, um, or being enslaved and the godling being forced to do what humanity wants it to do, or being drained of its power a little bit at a time, and people are taking pieces of the god, metaphysically or real physically as well, or a god is like pinned down to the earth somehow with like, a mile long spear trapped in its chest, and it's been laying there for so long that people like built a city around it, because maybe it doesn't look human. Maybe it's like, oh, that mountain range, yeah, that was one of the gods that was thrown down to the ground. And you see that spire that's reaching up into the sky that's kind of tilted to the side? Yeah, that's not a spire, that's a spear. And we built a tower at the end of it. And it's in the chest of the creature, like kaiju or something. Yeah, Cupid was the son of Mercury and Venus. A lot of incest going on with the Greek gods that we don't tend to talk about too much. Andreas Martin says, I always liked the idea that divine magic was the gift from the gods to the devout, and the wizards used the residual magic from the wars at the beginning of creation. There is a bardic, the new bardic tradition kind of falls into that, where the bardic tradition of creation, where the world, the universe was sung into being. There was a song note or what have you. It was like creation was literally how the universe was built, and they are able to pick at the strings or re-engage the song notes to create their own realities and whatnot. So that's a thing. Now, of course, you can't go very far in when world creating with clerics without having like religious wars and whatnot. But I think it would be really, really cool to have these like ongoing religious wars against heretics and stuff. But instead, it's like trying to recapture the power that's been taken from someone else's god, or like free them from bondage, or reconnect. Maybe there are religious institutions that aren't clerical, but they represent the other character class types. Imagine fighters, right? There's these people who have assembled for war, but they're all religious because they can no longer hear the voices of the gods that they believed in, because they've been cast out or harmed or dispersed or exiled or something, and they're battling with the other gods who are battling with their mortal kin to release the barrier that's holding back their own gods from the world. I could even see punishment being made for like lots of monsters, lots of especially a lot of the mutated style monsters like Ettins and gibbering mouthers and other mutated things being like punishments for those who either spoke up against the gods or weren't devout enough or did not complete quests or gees or gaiuses that they were supposed to. Yeah, Cameron says a divine note is like the polar opposite of the brown note, or is it? You're still creating something, I guess. Brown? What are you talking about? Like I'm talking about chocolate and lemonade. um, yeah, I think it would be kind of cool if, even if the mortals have like this divine connection, maybe somehow describing like why it is that clerics are able to on command do a thing. The O note. Anyway, maybe there's something about it like the gods have to be extremely careful who they choose as their mortal avatars because they can't get the power back, and most people think they can, but the gods are like, yeah, once we open that doorway, we can't do it. um, Also in world building, I think we often don't put a lot of effort into, well, the actual communication between the mortals and their godlings, right? Whether it's direct or through like emissaries or something. Like, why can't during one of those short or long rests, the cleric goes off and meditates or closes their eyes, but it becomes like a spirit journey. And for the cleric, it takes hours for them to have this conversation, but for everyone else, the cleric simply just close their eye for just a moment and open their eyes up. And that could be a good role playing moment where the cleric goes to sit off in the corner on their backpack while everyone's getting their camp set up, and the cleric like opens their hands and they close their eyes gently, and all of a sudden it's like they go into warp speed, like, and they like lift out of their body and get snatched off into through the astral plane back to the god's plane of existence, and it's like, hey, we need to talk. These mortals like, what the like, yeah, listen, get over it. Here's something to drink. Look, we got to talk. We need you to do this thing and do this other thing, and you're hanging out with people. Because it kind of brings up the point of like, I've always wondered why clerics or how clerics just can willy nilly just like, oh, I'm going to heal somebody else who is doesn't believe in what I believe, is of the opposite alignment, and pretty much thumbs their nose at all of my entire belief system. Like, why am I still able to grant them anything? Even if I wanted to heal them and I considered them a friend, why would the gods be like, F them? Like, they can't even offer throw a couple of copper in the box when they come into my religious organization. F you, barbarian. You know what I mean? Big giant hand reaches down from the sky with a big middle finger up at all the PC's allies, like, whatever. I'm being facetious, but I'm being sarcastic. But I do wonder about that. Like, is like, what is going on now? Of course, there are gods who are like, we want to convert everyone, but it does make you think about that. Cameron says, I wonder if magic could come from the people themselves, but there are different guides to use it, like a spell book for a wizard, a great beast for a druid, or a holy book for a cleric. That is another thing as well. Like, why maybe it is in everyone. Because there's always been a connection between the mortal coil and the belief in the gods, which is why they tend to want to have believers in the first place. And it's, of course, it's undefined. You wouldn't want to make that mechanical thing, right? Like, oh, the god has one hit point for every 10,000 worshippers or something. That'd be kind of ridiculous. But there is a connection in that way. And it would be pretty interesting to like, maybe the PCs are okay. So I said we wouldn't talk about this, but I got to bring it up. Sorry. All right. So we know in our own world that we have mythology, right? They're basically air quotes dead gods and dead beliefs. So I wonder if say if you could have an adventure where the PCs have, by law, a new noble steps forward, dispatches the old religion, and says this new religion takes place. And so, literally, by virtue of a noble going in and going, yeah, we're going to burn the books, tear down the churches or religious institutions because we have there's a new leader in town, and that has a mechanical effect on making the PC's gods disappear. And so now the PCs are left with like, are you telling me that the power we have right now is all we have left? And it's like, yep. And you got to figure out how to bring your gods back to life or reconnect or build a monastery or so, whatever. Like, that would be pretty interesting, that the PCs need to gather the worshippers to bring back the divinity in the first place, you know? Jarl DM says divine spark in all living things is common in most major religions in our world. Yeah, and that could be a reason why, like, let's say there's these holy wars and the gods are like, please don't start killing each other. Like, that's you're killing a part of us. Like, you got to stop it. You guys are a resource. So maybe in like enslavement or the conversion is far more important than holy wars and slaughter and genocide. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, like Cameron's like, right? Even if Group had 1 hit point per follower, he still has stats, and that means there's a way to kill him. Yeah, that's the old um Counter Monkey. If you guys may not remember about Counter Monkey, one of the first YouTubers who had like tens of thousands of subscribers, and Spoonie, the Counter Monkey, not coined the phrase, but disseminated the phrase of like, if you stat it, they will kill it, which is why you'll never see a D&D book. Yeah, Tesla's like, yeah, wipe out the followers first. Yep, you'll never see a role playing game book with stats for deities, because the minute you stat them, they'll kill them. The original deities and demigods statted out the gods, and the first thing players did is flip it open and go, the god Ares, he's only a 20th level monk and an 18th level fighter and a 22nd level barbarian or something. Fine, let's go kill him. There's always been that kind of thing. So fighting the gods and taking them out. Yep. Omen's like, yeah, I noticed Pathfinder gave the stats for them, and that was a big mistake. Huge mistake. Yep. Jarl DM says the War of the Spider Queen novels explore what happens when Loth vanishes and stops granting spells. That would be interesting. Like Omen says, and you can kill them, but it's hard. It depends on how much of a Monty Hall style game someone runs. Like a DM that hands out a whole lot of like magic items and players go up to like 38th level or something, then you get into that. That's why a lot of it goes from fantasy to superheroism when it goes above like 10th level, because there was a point in time when adventuring above 10th level literally was stepping from this realm into another realm. You've already gotten your name level. Yes, every level had a name. And once you got to between like 8th to 11th level, you got your name level. 9 was the average. And then beyond that, you were just going into other realms, other dimensions and things like that. Yep. Jarl DM says Iskloth only goes to level 10 because after that point, you're basically superhuman. Yeah, you go above 10th level and it's superhero time, right? There's nothing mortal or mundane that bothers you any longer at that point. So the only place you can go are to other realms of existence. Deadman says a Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones had that, where there was a new cleric trying to take over the Pantheon. Yep. And did it pretty handedly. Pretty handedly. And it was I loved it. I know some people didn't like that part of Game of Thrones where this new religious person comes in and stuff, but I loved it. I love the whole like rationalization of it. I love the fact that this priest was like spouting out stuff, but you could tell behind his eyes he was just using it as a tool. But at the same time, you're like, is he really? Does he really believe in this, or is this just political machinations and whatnot? I love that. I love that kind of stuff, and I wonder how much influence in a setting could you have where you have charlatans and people giving lip service, but are the gods allowing it because it still spreads their name? Or are they just looking aside because people are like ants and there's no reason to bother with it? Or what have you? Or, it's like I hate the idea of paladins like, oh, you don't follow your oath? You don't have your paladin abilities. I think that's BS. What I like would be like as a GM, as the paladin starts to like go against their oath, that some other religious entity starts to like fish for them and pull them in, and it's like, oh, by the way, one of your spell choices is, as DM, I'm taking over your spell choices. You can cast darkness. And a lawful good, or used to be lawful good paladins, like, wait, what? Like, yeah, one of your spell choices is darkness. Like, really? Yeah. Oh, by the way, when you get ready to pray to your godling or something, they don't answer, but a dark voice in the shadows does answer behind your shoulder with the flaming eyes, and it's like, I'll protect you instead. I'll give you what your godling has turned your back on you, but let me take over. That kind of thing. Your DM says, in fiction at least, continued success is proof that the gods support your actions. Right, right. And who's to say? Okay, I, after I say this, I have to bring up a movie, because I always bring up some kind of like movie or television show or something like that. But you'll understand. Yeah, like, for example, a cleric or paladin that goes against their tenets but still has their power might be convinced of their actions, or those in power that see rebels might want to kill the PCs because they can't let the population know that you're allowed to rebel and still retain that power, right? Which brings about its own issues. Or the PCs rebel against the violations of their own tenets, and maybe they're dumbstruck by, like, wait a minute, this person is completely corrupt, and yet they still gain the power of the gods. Like, what? How's that happening? And that would be pretty interesting, like, setting. Like, okay, where do they meet? Is there a meeting in the middle? Are there machinations happening that are going to take place over hundreds or thousands of years, and the mortals are just a small cog in a big wheel? And, that's a possibility as well. Jarl DM says, if you were doing something they hated, surely you'd be struck down, so you must be correct. That presumably, right? Unless you literally are an ant and they could care less about you. Which also brings up the subject: how important are you to something else? Yeah, Jarl DM. Quote, an open mind is like a fortress with its gates open and unguarded. The Inquisition. Yeah, that's a good way to have the Inquisition going after the PCs, right? Where the PCs rebel against their own doctrines, still maintain their power, go off in the distance, and then, like, the Inquisition's like, we've got to hunt them down and take them down because they are the weak chain to bringing down society, just their mere existence itself, which brings up its own problems. Yep. Jarl DM agrees. Like, yeah, orthodoxy is vital to a powerful church, and questioning and rebelling is not allowed, which makes a lot of sense, right? Like, a lot of things happen for a reason. So there is a movie. This is urban. I'll call this, instead of urban fantasy, I'll call it urban religion. There's a low budget movie called Prophecy. Christopher Walken, angels falling from the sky, all of them wearing black long coats, the whole nine yards. And great movie, low budget, but excellent movie. In the movie, there is a main character, who starts out as a Catholic, wants to go and become a Catholic priest. And during his upbringing, this character physically hears and feels God wrapping his warm embrace around him. At the moment he's about to take, I don't know the actual name of it, but it's the process of where you go from, an acolyte to becoming a Catholic priest. Lays down, supplicants himself, and suddenly God, boom, turns off the spout. He does not hear God's voice or embrace from that point on, and he screams out in pain. And so the character then becomes a cop, kind of a gritty police officer who, strangely enough, has a huge background in religious theology, while being a gritty street cop who doesn't believe in God anymore, can't stand the mention of him or whatever, but still has a lot of his knowledge. But the reason it happened, because in the movie, it's necessary for this unbelieving cop to be part of an investigation that involves fallen angels and the war of between Satan and the other angels, and Samuel and Ezekiel and all this kind of stuff. And so there can be things in motion that are not direct lines between 1 and 2. And I think in role-playing games, we tend to think of ourselves as being a direct conduit between the gods and ourselves, when you might just be look, all we need you to do is to be in this one place in time, to die, to be seen by the public, standing for something for everybody else, to create a rebellion, right? You don't know that you're supposed to arrive at this place to die, but the gods are like, yeah, we just need you to be there. We really don't need your existence beyond that point, except to be a rallying, a martyr, right? We just need you to educate the next generation. We don't need you to be the hero. We need you to be the person that teaches the hero. And so, much like a Obi-Wan Kenobi, who technically failed in their, through arrogance, you could claim that the Jedi were like this big organization that fell and collapsed inwardly. It could be something else. Yeah. And Cameron says, quote, "The Inquisition? What a show, the Inquisition. Here we go." Oh, yeah. Could you imagine that with like foam pointy fingers and like beer handed out and popcorn and whatnot? Dead Man says, in Warhammer 40K Imperial Creed, quote, "An open mind is like a fortress with its gates unbarred and unguarded." And that's in Warhammer 40K. Yeah. So, yeah, it could be there are things being moved around, and just because a paladin doesn't follow their oath or a cleric rebels against their own kind, that could be the point to get something else moving, because the gods already know that their own worshippers are crumbling from within, and there's a weakness there. So anyway, yeah, kind of, I don't think we squirreled today. But tomorrow is Third Pillar Thursday. We're going to talk about worlds that are shaped by the gods. Third pillar of exploration, which is combat and social interactions, being the first and second pillars. We will talk about that tomorrow as well. Also, guys, very, very much thank you very much for just being here, being part of the show. Just to let you know that the 9th book that in the cinematic environs released by Critical Hit Publishing, right smack there, is released in print on demand. It's pretty daunting. It's got everything from, it's all about wetlands, swamps, bogs, mires, diseases, parasites, all of it mechanically enabled. Everything from what happens when someone tries to drown you, or maybe you go to a place with in a swamp with like floating lily pads and things reaching out from underneath the swamps, and humidity and the whole nine. It's a lot of pages. It's damn near like 70, 80 pages of swampy goodness or something. So anyway, if you'd like, just go ahead, check that out. Look at the preview, whatnot. Don't take my word for it. Anyway, guys, have a great one. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you very much. Check you out later. Thanks for watching. Everybody have a great day.